Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Reardon. There have been lots of requests for an easy dessert recipe, so this week I'm going to show you how to make 3 quick and easy apple desserts. Firstly, the apple pie with a great short crust pastry, which is probably the most complicated out of all of them, even though it's still a simple dessert, followed by super quick apple turnovers, which are great if you've got lots of people coming over at the last minute, and then finally a gluten-free apple crumble recipe. To start with, for all 3 desserts, we need to turn on the oven and then prepare our apples. You can either use tinned pineapple, which has nothing but apple in it and a tiny bit of salt, or you can use fresh apple. If you're going with fresh, then you need to wash them and peel them. And there's no right or wrong way to peel an apple, just as long as you get all the peel off, that's fine. Once they're peeled, core them and slice them. I have this really handy apple cutter which I like to use for this job, and it cores and slices them all at one time, which speeds up the process. You can of course slice them using a knife and then cut the core part off each piece. Place the apple slices into a saucepan with a tablespoon of water and then put the lid on and cook over a medium-high heat for about 5 minutes until it is hot and bubbling, and then you can turn the heat off and leave the lid on and just leave it to sit there while you get your pastry ready. To make the pastry, you'll need some butter, flour, sugar, 1 egg and a little bit of milk. All of the recipe quantities are written on the website howtocookthat.net, and there's a link to the recipe in the description just below this video. Put your flour and your butter into a bowl and then use a knife to slice the butter into smaller pieces. Then rub the butter into the flour using your fingertips. So you're basically just squashing it between your thumb and your fingers and rubbing as you go, but making sure you get some flour in there when you're doing it. You don't just want to be squashing the butter, you want to be squashing it into the flour. Continue to do that for a few minutes until your mixture looks like this. There should be no big lumps of butter in there anywhere. It should look like fine breadcrumbs. Then add your sugar and mix that through well. In a separate bowl, put a little bit of milk and your egg and whisk them together with a fork. Then pour that into the flour mixture and stir it with a spoon until it's roughly together, and then use your hands to squash it together more and to knead it until you have a smooth ball of pastry. At this point, you should wrap your pastry and put it in the fridge and leave it to rest for half an hour, and that makes it easier to roll out. But because we're doing quick desserts, we're going to go ahead and roll it straight away. Put some baking paper on your benchtop and roll out your pastry until it is reasonably thin and big enough to cover the whole base of your pie dish, plus a bit more because we've got a pastry for the lid there as well. Then pick up your pastry, flip it over on the paper, and then carefully place it over the dish. Peel off the baking paper, and then going around the edges, lift and lower the pastry, pushing it into the corners and making sure there's no air bubbles trapped underneath your pastry. Then use a knife to trim off the excess, making sure your knife is leaning outwards so that the pastry is still over the rim of the dish, so there's something for our lid to join to. Add your apples. I make my pies nice and full, and these apples will drop down a little bit when they cook. So if you start with a pie that has apples that are flat, then you'll end up with a sunken top once it's baked in the oven. Sprinkle a little bit of sugar and cinnamon on top. If you like your pie really sweet, then you can add more sugar and cinnamon to your apples before you put them in the pie and mix it through. But because the pastry for this pie has some sugar in it, I don't think the filling needs to be really sweet. Roll out the rest of your pastry and check that it's big enough by holding the dish over the top of the pastry. Flip the pastry over, peel off your baking paper just like we did before, then use a knife to cut off the excess pastry, again leaning the knife outwards so that you're leaving some pastry on the rim of the dish. Then you can either leave it plain just like that, or use your thumb and your finger to pinch a pattern all the way around the edge of your pie. Take your knife and stab the top of the pie a few times so that there's space for the steam to escape. This stops you from getting a huge air bubble at the top of your pie. Then place it in the oven and let it bake until it's crisp, golden brown and ready to eat. This will take about 30 minutes. And you have a beautiful pie stuffed full of apples. Dessert number 2 is a super quick apple turnover. Using some store-bought puff pastry sheets and tinned apple, add some cinnamon and sugar to the apple and stir it through. Now this puff pastry that I'm using is not sweet, and that's why we're sweetening the apples to compensate for that. Cut your pastry sheet into quarters, cutting diagonally across the middle, and spoon on some of your apple and then fold the pastry in half, pressing on the edges to seal it shut. From last week's video, there was a lot of requests for me to do a Draw My Life video. For those of you who are new to How to Cook That, there's a Draw My Life in chocolate video on the channel. So if you go to How to Cook That, click on How to Cook That and go to the chocolate playlist, you'll find it there. Place your apple turnovers onto a baking tray and then take a fork and press down along the two joined edges to fuse the two pastry sheets together. Bake them in the oven until they're hot and your puff pastry is crispy and golden. Serve them immediately and you can add ice cream or whipped cream or custard to those. If you've got a favourite dessert that you like to make when people are coming over and it's a last minute thing, put the name of it in the comments below so everyone can get heaps of ideas of what else they can do when they're in a hurry. For our third dessert, we're going to make a gluten-free apple crumble. Use some almond meal or almond flour and rub some butter into the almond meal. And you could use gluten-free flour, but I just find in the crumble dessert, it's a bit pasty on the top of your mouth when you eat it, so I like to use almond meal in the crumble instead. Now, gluten is just the protein that is in wheat, and people who have celiac disease and gluten intolerance can't have any gluten in their diet, so they can't have any wheat at all. So we're making this one gluten-free. If you don't need it to be gluten-free, then you can just use regular all-purpose flour in this recipe instead. Then mix in your sugar, and then spoon some apple into your bowl, and you can make one large crumble or you can use smaller bowls to make individual serves. Top it with a generous sprinkle of your crumble mixture and bake it until the apple is hot and the crumble is golden and crunchy. Add some ice cream or some whipped cream and enjoy. Thanks for watching. You can click on the subscribe button to subscribe to How to Cook That for more dessert recipes, cake decorating tutorials and chocolate creations, and click on the How to Cook That banner if you want to go through to the channel and watch the Draw My Life video. And have a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.